Vance awoke to something licking his face. Bolting upright, he scared the young doe away. He was in a clearing, surrounded by birch, pine, and what looked like oak trees scattered to his right. Other trees he couldn't identify poked out, fighting for light, among the massive oaks towering over them. He had on his favorite outfit, Red Hot Chili Peppers shirt, a pair of black Vans, and black jeans. So at least there's that, Vance thought. To his left, a lake stretched as far as the eye could see, and a sign stuck out from the ground made of a metal post and a stop sign. Scrawled on the sign, "Welcome, traveler. Hope you enjoy what this world has to offer. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this." Despite the words on the sign, there was nothing else around, just grass, the lake, and the forest. Searching for some kind of clue as to what the sign was talking about, he noticed his reflection in the lake. Vance froze. He had blonde hair now? And his face did not look like him. Childish look from chubby cheeks and short hair were all gone. In its place were a model with sunken cheeks, a well-defined chin, long brown hair, and eyes that were even a lighter blue. Disoriented, he sat on a rock a few steps away to collect his thoughts. Running his hand through his luxurious new hair, he investigated his surroundings a bit closer. He saw, just a few feet away, some kind of mushroom. It looked like a shiitake, but seemed a little different, though Vance was no student of mycology. He decided it was probably edible. Vance was not a survival expert kind, so his next move might surprise some of you, including me. He took off his shoes and socks, rolled up his pant legs, and walked into the lake. He noticed a drop-off a few feet from where he entered. Just beyond, a few minnows floated by in a group and quickly startled off as if noticing he was there as they got closer. Reaching in, Vance found a nice piece of what he thought was quartz and chert rock. It had some red swirls in the quartz part, so the thought of iron crossed his mind. He kept grabbing out rocks he liked and thought he could use, including a 20-kilo slab of something that reminded Vance of marble, but had quartz in it, along with a glass-like black rock. It was almost a perfect rectangle. He also found a nice solid gray stone and a few other pieces of chert. He dragged all of it back to the sign and sat down on the monster of a rock he just pulled from the lake. He grabbed the solid gray stone and a piece of chert and started chipping at the side of the chert with the solid gray stone. Sure enough, it fractured at the bottom, chipping away in a pattern he had seen before about making Aboriginal blades out of stone on YouTube. He set down his hammer rock and moved over to the sign with his piece of chert stone and struck its newly formed edge against the side of the sign. "Damn, no sparks," Vance said aloud, realizing he had just spoken his first word since he had come to this strange new land. The growing sense of disorientation, followed by a mosquito biting him, had him chucking the stone to the ground and pulling his hair in frustration. "Calm down," Vance told himself. He knew panicking was the worst thing he could do. He had to think, and be rational. He noticed it had to be around noon or so, with the sun near the middle of the sky. Feeling alone and vulnerable and hearing a rustling sound in the shrubs nearby, had the thought of fire springing into his mind a little bit more persistently. Vance needed fire, water, and food, most importantly, before he dared venture too far. He had a feeling he wasn't going to find a road or people too easily, and at least needed essentials before he began exploring the land around him. Maybe even a boat, with a giant lake that seemed to stretch on like an ocean. And all he could see were trees to the right and left until they became a blur. His eyes fell to the pile of stones, and he picked up another piece, this time the chert with the iron-swirled quartz in it. He took his time and gave it a nice whack with his hammerstone. A nice flat piece broke off the bottom. He did it again around the edge until it formed a nice foot-long oblong shape. He set the stone down, satisfied with his work so far. He could come back to it. What interested Vance right now was the sign, and the way it resembled a stop sign. He pushed at the stop sign and felt it give a bit. He quickly began wiggling it back and forth and tried to tug it out like a weed. Shortly he gave up, shaking and flexing his tired hands open and closed. He grabbed what was soon to be a stone knife and started digging around the post of the sign. Vance found it had a cement-like bottom and quickly started digging around the top and sides of the cement until the whole base of the sign was visible. He gave the sign one more pull-up, and with a grunt, he dragged it from the hole. Vance tossed the sign aside and sat down. Realizing he was way too thirsty to keep working at this pace, he went over to the water and scooped up a handful, closely inspecting it before he decided just to drink it. It wasn't horrible tasting, surprisingly. A bit earthy for sure, but he could figure out a way to filter it later if he needed to. He went back to the sign and chuckled. This should be fun. He grabbed the sign with 2 hands and brought the cement end up to his head height and bashed it on his nice futon stone, and it came apart in a few pieces after a second whack. Now he had a less cumbersome stop sign. Suddenly, he heard a bark, bark, bark coming from a shrub rustling just inside the forest off to his right. He stood up, straight and silent. Looking closer, he noticed what looked to be a chicken pecking at one of the buds protruding from the shrub. Well, more of a plant. It just had a bushy look to it. The chicken stopped suddenly and looked directly at Vance. Vance was feeling his stomach yell at him in frustration, and luckily the chicken went straight back to pecking away at his shrub. Vance crept closer, thinking if he could just get close enough, he could just jump on the chicken and possibly get some eggs, or a chicken at the least. It was a hen after all. He got within 5 feet of the chicken as it looked up. The cute little hen showed a green bar with 50 health and a level 2 above it. The hen then frantically tried to fly the other way. Vance ended up diving and catching a leg of the chicken, but then he heard a much louder series of barks. They sounded like some kind of Malamute. Nothing like the little chicken he let go of. It scampered toward the sound of the booming barking, and as Vance looked up, he saw what could only be described in these 3 words. Giant mother-clucking chicken, staring straight into his mother-clucking soul, showing 20,000 under a green bar and having a double question mark as its level. It was on him before he could even finish the thought. This chicken was 4 times bigger than he was and twice as tall. Vince must have ruffled the big bird's feathers a bit too much, because its beak took a massive bite out of his arm that just moments ago held what he thought was the start to a good survival rate. "Ah!" screamed Vance as a red 20 dropped down through the top right of his vision. Right above it was just over half a green bar, reading 30 out of 50 HP. He yanked his arm away and started sprinting as fast as he could away from that abomination of a fowl. Blood was flowing freely from his wound as he used his other hand to stem the flow, running as fast as his feet could take him and not looking back. He eventually tripped over a root a few hundred feet away and noticed that the giant chicken had forgotten about him and was happily prying the bud-carrying plant out of the ground, along with the other little chicken happily balking away at what Vance assumed was his mother. The pain was real life despite the game-like health bars. He had already tried everything he could think of to pull up some user interface with no success. It seemed no different from what real life offered him. Vance got out of that immediate area for the time. He needed something to stem the flow of blood. He limped towards the edge of the forest he had been running through and glanced back at the giant chicken, then the stop sign that was only a few feet away, within what he hoped could be his base camp. He took his shirt off and wrapped it around his arm wound, tying it tight while slightly wincing, then started crawling to try his attempt at being a ninja and maybe unlocking some sort of stealth skill. He crept towards the stop sign. Slowly making his way there, he glanced over at the giant hen that was pecking at the base of a tree just a few feet away, making the entire tree shiver as if cold. He slowly picked up the sign, and as he backed away, crazy thought popped into his head of him frying a large chicken. He suddenly gained the courage to wield the sign in both hands, yelled out a battle cry of "I'm gonna eat you!" and sprinted towards the chicken. The chicken, however, did not seem to even notice Vance and his Leroy Jenkins-looking self, not until Vance came flying in with an overhead chop. With a mighty shout, he brought the stop sign down with all of his might and missed the chicken completely. The chicken dodged back and then forward and pecked the signpost in half with one quick snap of its beak, then grabbed its hen chick with its right wing and bolted off into the forest in a couple of strides. Sighing, Vance fell to the ground and cried. A good cry once in a while isn't always a bad thing. After a couple of minutes, he sat up and started looking around. Wondering why the giant chicken had fled, he glanced towards the opposite way of where the chicken had just run. To his horror, trees seemed to be falling and crashing from something that had to be much bigger than the Mad Mother Hen, and whatever it was coming right for him. Thank you very much for listening to Chapter 1 of Rural Rares, a book written by Frazzle, illustrated by Lil, and narrated by Campsite Cook. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, releasing soon. Thanks again for listening. Bye now.